The doom and gloom has lifted in the desert. That's what happens when you go to the Rose Bowl and defeat an undefeated UCLA team. So Arizona State back on track and at home this week to take on the Colorado Buffs. So we bring in Kaelen Jones of House of Sparky to help us set us up between the Sun Devils and Colorado. Kaelen, thanks so much for joining us. You have to feel great about the effort at the Rose Bowl. What turned out to be the keys for you, and were you a bit taken off guard?
Thanks for having me, Mark, first of all. But yeah, the contest against UCLA, I'm completely surprised. But the one thing that I would point out that was key to the victory was Todd Graham's defense, which, as stubborn as it was and ended up being the downfall against USC, where you're sending 7-8 guys on every single pass play, and nonetheless every single play, it turned out being the reason why ASU was able to disrupt Josh Rosen's comfort level, especially him being a true freshman. It really threw him off early in the game, and ended up playing a huge factor in the outcome of the game. Not only that, but it played into the field position game as well. Granted, UCLA, their offense came in with one of the best rushers in the country in Paul Perkins, who I believe is 18th in the country or 8th or something like that. He was averaging over 100 yards a game. And ASU's rush defense really stepped up. And on special teams, you're talking about the play of Matt Hawk, who probably had the play of the game, where he punted a ball, I believe, 40 yards, and it dribbled out at about UCLA's 1-yard line with just over 4 minutes left. So it was a really good performance all around for ASU. It was a really complete performance, and that's something that I harp on. Also, the play of the offensive line was completely outstanding. It was the best it's been this entire season. This group has really struggled against no-name teams like New Mexico and Cal Poly, but they only allowed 1 sack on Mike Bercovici against UCLA, and only no quarterback hits were recorded throughout the game. So it was an outstanding performance from them. All in all, it was a great team performance. I wouldn't say there was one key player. It was really a true Todd Graham performance in the sense that you had a complete team effort, very disciplined as well. No turnovers, or besides the one errant pass from Mike Bercovici, but it was a really clean game from ASU, and something that I guess we have to expect now over the course of the last couple of years. That's this 3rd year in a row now where ASU has fallen in a big time performance against a conference opponent, only to rebound in the next game and upset either USC or UCLA. And this year it ended up being UCLA once again in the Rose Bowl.
Kaelen, you mentioned the offensive line performance, and for as dominant as UCLA was the week before going to Arizona, the one thing the Wildcats did was rush the football against UCLA's front. And my favorite play of the game, there were so many great games on last Saturday night, but I locked in on the fourth quarter. My favorite play was I don't know that I've ever seen a pile pushed 19 yards into the end zone. That was amazing.
Oh yeah, I actually had the chance to go cover the game in person, and I at that point I was down on the field, and me and another reporter, one of my colleagues, we were sitting there watching the play in disbelief. We didn't say a word. We were just basically holding each other in disbelief, watching the pile just carry and carry and carry all the way into the end zone to seal the game. It was fun to be a part of. I'll say that too. It was really spectacular, and just the ASU contingent in themselves are one of the most loyal fan bases in the entire nation. I was sidebar. I was at Disneyland the other day, and I saw more ASU gear than any other school. Just to let USC and UCLA fans know, they need to probably show up in a better contingent. But yeah, I think what ASU was able to do was something really special. And in light of USC falling to Washington tonight, they basically controlled their own destiny for the South once again. So we'll see if ASU is able to pull it out, or if they falter down the road like they did last year.
Kaelen, we talked so much during the offseason about Mike Bercovici's performance and the expectation of it, considering his handful of games last year. How well do you think he's played?
I think he's gotten better. One of the things that I was harping on up through the USC game was that despite being inexperienced, he's still a 5th-year senior. And while he is in a system that personally I don't think that caters to his skill set, he's done pretty well considering the fact that he doesn't have a Jalen Strong. He did lose another familiar weapon in Cameron Smith, who went out for the season with a torn ACL before the season even started. So for him to kind of do well with what is a more makeshift type of unit at the receiver core, despite having DJ Foster, he's done relatively well. And, you know, at least maybe I'm probably harping more or taking into account his performance against UCLA, where I really think he looked like the Mike Bercovici of old. Last season, he didn't really struggle in Mike Norvell's offense, even though it's a spread, multiple look, and it does require him to use his legs a bit more often than he's probably accustomed to. He didn't look too bad. I mean, one of the things that he does is stare down receivers, and he does get a little antsy, and that's just who he is as a leader as well. He's very vocal. He's very emotional. You can see it in every single post-game and pre-game interview with him as well. He's a very passionate leader, and he loves the game of football, and you could tell. And he really put on a great performance against UCLA. To this point, 120 completions on 200 attempts, I believe 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns. The 3 picks is a little bit concerning, and he's had a couple of fumbles. But when he decides to run the football and utilize his legs, which he's, I guess you'd say he's an underrated mobile quarterback, really, when he does put that ability on display, he's shown that he's able to cater to this offense as a leader, not only emotionally, but physically. And it shows up in the stat sheet as well. That 34-yard run for a score against UCLA pretty much pushed ASU clearly ahead of UCLA in the recent game. So as long as he's able to keep it together and, you know, stay focused and not be too antsy and jittery in the pocket, I think that Bercovici is going to continue to perform pretty well going forward. I think he's finally figured it out. DJ Foster's play is starting to benefit as well, and you could tell that most of the receivers are pretty comfortable with him. I believe ASU is one of only 4 teams in the entire country who have 4 different receivers with over 15 receptions. And I believe that's DJ Foster, Cody Cole, Demario Richard, and I want to say it's Gary Chambers or Ellis Jefferson. I'm sorry, I forget that, but he over 50 receptions for 4 different receivers. That's pretty good considering he's a college quarterback. This isn't Peyton Manning or anything. This is a college quarterback in Mike Bercovici, nonetheless a 5th year with who's only started, I believe, 7 or 8 games now in his entire career. So he's played he's on the cusp of playing relatively well. The season started off pretty rough, but he's starting to get around.
Kaelen, I'm guessing if you grab the average Pac-12 fan of a contending team and have them look through the schedule, if they're honest, they're looking for the Colorado game, they're looking for possibly a Washington State or Oregon State, because the rest of it's brutal. The rest of it's just very difficult. So you got the 1 or 2 buys, but the Buffs are playing pretty well. They took a Colorado State team to overtime. They played that game pretty well. They probably should have beaten Hawaii early in the season. That was controversial at the end. Right. They turned in a pretty good 3 quarters against Oregon before kind of collapsing in the 4th quarter. So you've got the Buffs coming in. Your thoughts on Colorado at this point?
It'll be an interesting matchup for sure, definitely. You're looking at, considering UCLA's matchup last week where they had a top 10 rusher in the country in Paul Perkins. ASU limited him to the under 70 yards, I believe. And then even before halftime, they had UCLA at -7 yards. And then looking at, in comparison, Colorado, they have 3 rushers who are averaging over 60 yards a game. I believe Christian Powell and Tony Jones are definitely going to spearhead that look. So I think that's going to be the key matchup in terms of Colorado's rushing offense against ASU's rushing defense. I think that's going to be the key matchup on the field. Sipo Lifo, or I apologize if I'm butchering his name, but he's not that bad of a quarterback. I thought last year when watching his matchup or watching him play against ASU, he did pretty well. I believe his favorite target, Nelson Spruce, is one of the more underrated pass catchers in the country. And you know, just looking at the matchup in general, I think ASU is going to have the edge, and deservedly so, coming off of the win over UCLA. Colorado, unfortunately, Mike McIntyre still has a bit of ways before this team is going to be ready to compete with anyone else in the Pac-12. Nonetheless, Pac-12 South, which is arguably the best division in the country. But I think ASU is going to be able to comfortably come away with a victory here, should they play as well as they did against UCLA. But of course, I mean, we've seen ASU have hiccups before, so nothing's a given, especially in the Pac-12 South. But I take ASU in this one pretty comfortably.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Kaelen, Leofau, getting the job done for the most part at 59%, 5 touchdowns, 2 picks. They spread it around, as you mentioned, running back by committee, 3 backs, and Lindsey, Powell, and Adkins all over 212 yards. And they've got 10 rushing touchdowns out of those 3 guys. And Nelson Spruce, one of the best in the business, although teams have keyed on him a little bit more. So 31 catches sounds like a ton, but for this kid who caught well over 100 last year, he's been held a little bit more in check with only 1 touchdown grab. All right, Kaelen Jones from House of Sparky helping us set up Colorado's visits to Arizona State. So, Kaelen, we appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for having me.